Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. The manhunt continues for Charlie Kirk's killer as a Conservative activist is shot during a university appearance. Peter Mandelson, the UK's ambassador to the United States, is sacked over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. And the UK announces it's producing advanced drones to help Ukraine defend itself from Russian airstrikes. Now, a manhunt continues for the person responsible for the fatal shooting of right political activist and Trump ally Charlie Kirk. The 31-year-old was appearing at a university in Utah when a gunman opened fire. Officials believe the shot came from a rooftop. President Trump said he's filled with grief and anger at the heinous assassination, calling it a dark moment for America. Earlier today, during a 9/11 memorial in Virginia, Trump announced he was awarding Kirk with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Take a listen.
Charlie was a giant of his generation, a champion of liberty, and an inspiration to millions and millions of people. Our prayers are with his wonderful wife, Eric, and his beautiful children. Fantastic people they are. We miss him greatly, yet I have no doubt that Charlie's voice and the courage he put into the hearts of countless people, especially young people, will live on. I'm pleased to announce that I will soon be awarding Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The date of the ceremony will be announced, and I can only guarantee you one thing, that we will have a very big crowd, very, very big.
Let's get the latest from Washington with our correspondent, Sarah Firth. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Just before we came on the show, the FBI have now released an image of the person of interest. What else do we know about their investigation so far?
Yes, Leigh-Ann, that manhunt's still very much ongoing. And just in the last 10 minutes or so, as you said, authorities releasing this image of what they say is a person of interest in the killing of Charlie Kirk in this shooting incident in Utah. You can see from the number of images, the man's wearing glasses. He's got a dark T-shirt on with a sort of logo on the front. And they're appealing really for anyone with information or who might recognize this person to get in touch. And actually, the Utah Department of Public Safety released a statement along with the images. They said, "We're seeking the public's help in identifying this person of interest in connection with the fatal shooting." Now, interestingly, Leigh-Ann, a little earlier on in the morning, we had that press conference from the FBI and local authorities there in Utah. Now, they'd said at the time that they did have video footage and images of a suspect, of someone that was of interest in connection with the shooting, but they weren't going to release the images just yet. They said because they were going to be trying to use facial recognition technology. It seems that in the last little while, there has been that development where they now have put out those images publicly and are calling for the public to help. They've also said in the investigation, there's been some pretty major developments overnight, that they think they have recovered the weapon, that is a high-powered bolt-action rifle, and that they've been tracing the movements of a suspect from when he arrived on the campus up on the roof where it's thought the shot was fired from. We heard FBI saying they'd taken a palm print impression, a forearm impression, shoe impressions. All of that is going to be worked as part of this investigation right now to really try and close the net around the suspect and take him into custody.
And Sarah, we just heard from the President, Donald Trump, before. I felt he looked quite emotional today. Charlie Kirk was known to him and his family. So this makes it really personal, doesn't it?
It is personal. It's not just political for President Trump and indeed his administration. Leigh-Ann, many people in his administration, in the White House, here in Washington, D.C. and across the country knew Charlie Kirk personally. We've seen that reflected. You're right, in the statements from President Trump, he was the one who announced that Charlie Kirk had died. He has been speaking in very raw, stark, emotional terms. He described this as a dark moment for America. He said there he started his speech at that 9/11 memorial service saying that he will be awarding Charlie Kirk with the Presidential Award of Freedom. Some of the other people who have been awarded that in the past, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., more recently Hillary Clinton. So that's the kind of company that Charlie Kirk is going to be keeping in that posthumous award from the president. It's a major announcement. But also, we've been hearing from those within President Trump's inner circle, his son, the likes of White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. People have been sharing stories, not just of Charlie Kirk as this conservative activist figure who was well known across the country, but also as a friend, as a colleague. People knew him, and so this has really sent shockwaves across the country, but right here into the Capitol in Washington, D.C.
And Sarah, given Charlie Kirk's prominence as a conservative figure, is this sparking a wider debate now in the US about political violence and also gun control?
It is, Leigh-Ann, and the conversation is very difficult because this isn't just a question of gun control, the usual debate that's had around school shootings and the like here in America. America's real struggle to grapple with their problem when it comes to gun violence. This has the added element of also being a politically motivated act, we're told, by authorities. The Utah governor came out with very unambiguous language. He called this a political assassination. We've heard President Trump tie this incident, the killing of Charlie Kirk on the college campus, to his assassination attempt last year in Butler, Pennsylvania. There have been other incidents as well of political violence where there's a real sense here in America right now that this is a dangerous moment for the country and that there has been an uptick in this type of political violence. And, America is known, they hold very proudly, Americans, their defense of the freedom of speech. And there's a feeling that that is under threat here now because Charlie Kirk, this very prominent activist, very divisive with his views, but he was someone who was partaking in the public discourse. He was very prominent. He was on college campus to discuss his political ideas. And so the sense now that that kind of activity is coming with a very serious risk. And so a big question as to exactly what happens moving forward. We've had a hint from the president. He has promised to find everyone involved in any way in this. And he's also promised a crackdown on this type of political violence. But of course, Leigh-Ann, the question is what exactly that will involve moving forward, what action will be taken to match those words.
Sarah Firth in Washington, thank you so much for joining us. We're now joined by a friend of Charlie Kirk, Colonel Rob Maness. Rob, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, I know Charlie Kirk was a personal friend of yours. His charisma gained him this huge following. But what kind of man was he behind the scenes?
Well, thanks for having me on. Look, the kind of man he was what he displayed, and that is his Christian faith. I met him early on. I think he was still in his late teens, right after he started Turning Point USA, when I entered the political arena about the same time and ran for the U.S. Senate. And what most impressed me as Charlie grew up, essentially in that political arena, is the growth in his Christian faith. His growth as a father and a husband and a family man. And that is what he led with. And that is one of the things that makes this such a tragedy, is that the one man that insisted on free speech and civil debate and inviting those who opposed his views to debate with him on college campuses, that one man is being accused of being divisive, for advocating for American ideas and family ideas and his Christian faith, when it's the division of the left in the United States of America and all around this country that is causing this violence. It is not the right. It is not the Charlie Kirk followers. Last night, in the tens of thousands all across this country, young people weren't out burning like the other side likes to do, or trying to hurt or kill people to display their anger. They went to memorial services and prayed in churches, at parking lots all around this country. And that's the difference. That's what makes that's the Charlie Kirk that I knew when I was in my, I'm 32 years older than him, so I'm not his peer, but from a political perspective in that arena, we are peers because we started at about the same time. And that's what's most impressive. He leads with his faith. He means what he says. He tells the truth. He respectfully invites debate from the opposition. And he has persuaded tens of thousands of young men and women in this country that the ideas of America and his Christian faith are the winning ideas and the right ideas for us to move forward as a civil society, instead of one that descends into the anarchy that the left is trying to get us to do. And that's what part of this assassination, this political assassination, is all about. And I think that you will be impressed with what Charlie Kirk supporters do. Exactly what I said. They're praying, they're going to remember him, and they're going to continue his mission every single day.
And what you've just explained to me is Charlie Kirk wasn't just influential in the US. He was influential globally, and especially for many young people. We do have to remember that he brought his politics and his debate to the world, and he wanted the freedom of speech. So to many people, he was an absolute icon. But you did mention that there. He was also divisive. He was a divisive figure. And why was he so divisive?
No, let me correct you on that. I said he is not divisive and his ideas are not divisive. It's the other side and the mainstream media that tries to say he's the divisive one when it's their ideas and the left's ideas that are attempting to divide this country. And even this assassination is the furthest attempt you can go as a human being to try to divide this country and create anarchy, chaos, and violence across a society. Charlie Kirk is the one that's sane, in the middle, inviting debate, inviting his opposing views to be persuaded in a civil, respectful debate. You never saw him get angry with somebody that opposed him. You always saw him be respectful and civil. And he did it not only, I'm glad you mentioned around the world. He's been to the Oxford Union. His last trip was in South Korea because South Korea is under attack by the left. And they're trying to take over that society there too. And he is an internationally known, a great American figure that leads with his Christian faith and the ideas of America that fight tyranny. And that tyranny is what the other side wants to use. And just like you tried to do just now, to say he's the divisive one, no, they're the divisive ones. And we are going to continue his mission, and we're going to win, because the American idea of freedom, of prosperity, freedom of speech is the opposition to what the other side is pushing, is tyranny, oppression, and violence.
So, Rob, we're talking about the violence and the tyranny that you say is trying to be pushed by the left. How concerned are you that the assassination of Charlie Kirk will lead to increased violence and drive further division in America?
It won't lead to increased violence from those that support Charlie Kirk and those that love America. It's only going to lead, as it has already done, lead to violence from the left. And as we find out more about this operation that killed Charlie Kirk and those people that are involved, it's already starting to look like it was coming from the left, the anti-fascist, the anti-Antifa, transgenderist, terrorist movement that's been building in this country, all from the left. So I don't expect that any violence is going to increase on our part, but it will increase on the left's part because they're going to continue to try to divide this country and create violence and death and chaos. And that is not America. That is the wrong view. The right view is to continue down the path of civil, respectful debate, which is what Charlie Kirk stood for. When I met him, I was impressed because he would go to college campuses and talk to people that had opposing views and let them air their views. That is the core of free speech, the core idea of freedom in America. That's what he died doing. And it was the left that created the violence that killed him and that continues to try to divide this country. Well, we Americans, we're not going to let that happen. And we're not going to let more gun control happen. We're not going to let solutions happen that don't work. And that solution doesn't work. Just look at the United Kingdom right now. They gave up their guns. Their entire country is in chaos, anarchy, and violence, and the British are losing their nation.
And you have served in the US Army. Is it accurate to assume the shot fired at Charlie last night was done by a professional? And will the person responsible be caught?
I served in the United States Air Force, and I had under my command the only sniper team in the United States Air Force at the time when I was a wing commander. So it looks like there may be some professional training involved, but it's really hard to tell and too early to tell at this point. I understand from the FBI reporting that they think they have recovered the firearm, which was a high-powered bolt-action rifle, which is the type of rifle that someone that's trained to be a sniper would like to use because it's more stable, more accurate than a semi-automatic rifle from the training that I've seen given to sniper teams. But we're just going to have to wait and see.
Colonel Rob Maness, a friend of Charlie Kirk, I am so sorry for your loss, but thank you so much for joining us and for giving us an insight into the man. Thank you. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. President Donald Trump had a heated phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after launching an attack in Qatar. The Wall Street Journal reports Trump told Netanyahu that the decision to strike inside Qatar was not wise. Meanwhile, Qatar's Prime Minister said the strike killed any hope of a hostage release. Funerals for those killed in the strike are being held today. At least 14 people have been killed in Bali in what officials say are the island's worst floods in a decade. Torrential rains triggered severe flooding across most of the island, causing rivers to burst their banks. The provincial government has declared a week-long state of emergency. Spain's parliament has shelved a bill that would have shortened the week by 2.5 hours. Opposition lawmakers argued that small businesses and farmers would incur higher costs from the policy, which would lead to job losses. In spite of a defeat, the Labour minister has vowed to reintroduce reforms that will lower the weekly working hours. And South Africa's highest court has said husbands can now take the surnames of their wives, overturning a law that barred them from doing so. The country's constitutional court ruled that the law amounted to gender-based discrimination. Parliament will now have to amend the Births and Deaths Registration Act in order for the ruling to take effect. The UK will start producing advanced interceptor drones to defend Ukraine against Russian airstrikes. Designed in Ukraine and supported by Britain, the weapons will have the capacity to destroy Moscow's ongoing aerial assaults. Speaking in London today, the UK's Defence Minister John Healey shared more details on this project, the first joint technology agreement between Westminster and Kyiv. And we can now speak to Major General Chip Chapman, former head of counter-terrorism at the MOD and senior British military advisor to US Central Command. Major General Chapman, thank you so much for joining us. Yesterday, we witnessed Poland, a NATO country, intercepted Russian drones which had been fired into its airspace. Is today's announcement from the UK Defence Secretary intended to further protect Britain from a potential attack?
No, I don't think there's any correlation between the two. There might be causation, but essentially this has always been something which is in train to make sure that the airspace of Ukraine is better for the future, not the airspace of Britain. And it's no coincidence, I think, that it was announced at the DSEI, that's the Defence Security and Equipment exhibition, which is being held at London at the moment. So it's a deliverable which the government would always have had on its books, but it bolsters up the Ukrainian air defence. There has always been within the Ramstein format, which is where the support to Ukraine is coordinated, a drone coalition which is actually led by Latvia. So the UK contributes to that. It's coordinated so that the funding and delivery is all in sync. But I think the really interesting thing in terms of the drones for the future is that these use artificial intelligence, so they can overcome Russian jamming and things like that, so that they can actually be used in an offensive posture against Russian drones, particularly the Shahed drones. And this is not new. In fact, it's the former CEO of Google has been part of this coalition and is delivering hundreds of thousands under a program called White Stork.
And I think one thing that a lot of analysts have been saying actually throughout this war is just how much the drone technology has improved. And do you think that many people can learn from what Ukraine and the UK are doing right now?
Well, I think that's the million-dollar question, really, that the speed of innovation is the thing that gives you military advantage. And we're always talking about whether the character of war has changed. I think one of the things that has changed is that one of the predominant factors in success in 20th century land operations was control of the air. And what we've actually seen is a democratization of the control of the air, where a infantry section of, say, 8 men now have an ability to see and reach over the hill in an offensive posture. And that is something that they've not been able to do before. So it's that democratization which is really interesting for the future. And it's whether that has really altered the structure of future battle groups and brigades in any army in the world. Is there a role for artillery or mortars or things like anti-tank guided weapons in the future? The jury's still out on that, of course, because every war has a development, counter-development, i.e. where does electronic warfare come into this? Does laser technology in the future mean that you can knock out drone swarms just with radio frequencies, for example, which is one of the technologies the British are always also developing at the moment. So it's not a given at the moment that drones are the way to go in the middle future. Obviously, it's the way it's going and playing out at the moment, because it's very difficult for Russia and for Ukraine to overcome the killing zone. So essentially, you've got 10 or 20 kilometers of territory which you just can't get over because of the surveillance and destructive power of the drones that are on the battlefield at the moment.
And around 300 British troops are already stationed in Poland, which sits, of course, on the border with Ukraine. Could we see boots on the ground in Kyiv anytime soon if Putin continues to test the West? Because many people are saying that that was a test to NATO.
Well, I think it was a test to NATO in terms of what are red lines, but I don't think it's a test in terms of military operations, in terms of kinetic stuff, and neither do I think we're anywhere near World War III. What it's ultimately a test of is the will of NATO as an alliance. Can it function as a collective organisation? Now, the British element in Poland is under a thing called Operation Kabryt, that actually was a result of the initial Russian invasion in 2014, where at the Warsaw Summit in 2016, NATO went to a posture of enhanced forward presence. That's why there are multinational battle groups in Poland and the 3 Baltic countries. In terms of can we see British boots on the ground in the near future, the answer to that is it depends on the sequencing. So it's whether the sequencing means you're going to see them after a ceasefire, peace agreement, or a peace treaty, and we don't know any of the detail that might happen. And indeed, because the Russians have rowed back from this, from the thing that Witkoff said that Putin had given an Article 5-like security guarantee, which he's now said he didn't, we don't seem to be any closer to peace. And indeed, there seem to be more potholes than a pathway to peace at the moment.
And just whilst I actually have you, just quickly, if you can, we have spoken about President Donald Trump's upcoming state visit to the UK next week. And now, in light of the shooting of Charlie Kirk, could we see security measures being stepped up to accommodate the president during his time in the UK? Because we also know there was an assassination attempt on President Donald Trump previously.
Well, the planning for any visit of this nature goes on really up to a year before. And so the protective security measures are already 100% there. What's interesting about this visit is it's quite a short visit. It's 2 days. And also there's very little public-facing element to it. So, for example, there's no carriage drive with the public, and most of it is contained within the Windsor estate of the Royal Palace there, along with Chequers, where he's meeting the Prime Minister. So the security headaches are lessened by that, and because there's no public facing. But there's never be complacent about these things, and they'll always look if there are any gaps. But I don't think there are, and I don't think there'll be, everything will be tied down already. It would be tied down weeks before.
Major General Chip Chapman, thank you so much for joining us. Brilliant to get your insights. Peter Mandelson, the UK's ambassador to the United States, had been sacked today following allegations over his relationship with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Questions had been asked about Mandelson's link to the disgraced financier after birthday messages and emails became public earlier this week. Yesterday, the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, stood by his man in Washington. But today, Starmer has withdrawn him from his post. Here's how the news broke in Parliament earlier.
Mr. Speaker, in light of additional information in emails written by Peter Mandelson, the Prime Minister has asked the Foreign Secretary to withdraw him as ambassador to the United States. The emails show, Mr. Speaker, that the depth and extent of Lord Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is materially different from that known at the time of his appointment. In particular, Mr. Speaker, Lord Mandelson's suggestion that Jeffrey Epstein's first conviction was wrongful and should be challenged is new information.
And that was what we just heard about Peter Mandelson in Parliament earlier today. And coming up in the show, we'll be speaking to Rebecca Hudson, Editor-in-Chief of The News Movement. That interview coming up next after the latest business news. Let's take a quick look at it. Shares of Swedish lender Klarna made a strong debut on Wall Street, jumping more than 30% when trading opened and valuing the firm at over $19 billion. The buy now, pay later giant has been a hit with shoppers worldwide, though some worry the model encourages overspending. Merck is pulling the plug on a £1 billion expansion in the UK, saying the government isn't backing the life sciences sector enough. The pharma giant will shift its research to the US, cut jobs in London and vacate major labs. Experts warn the move could push other drug companies to stop investing in Britain too. Oracle said shares surged more than 35% after the software firm projected massive revenue growth based on contracts tied to AI. The stock hike lifted the company's market valuation to around $950 billion US dollars. The surge is expected to boost the wealth of the Oracle chairman, Larry Ellison, who could surpass Elon Musk as the world's richest person. Let's go to all the sports news now, when Mexican boxing superstar Canelo Alvarez is set to defend his undisputed super middleweight crown against American Terence Crawford in Las Vegas this weekend. Alvarez says he's ready to give fans another big victory for Mexico, while Crawford looks to make history as the first man to be the undisputed in 3 weight classes. Let's return to that Mandelson story and go live to London to speak to Rebecca Hudson, Editor-in-Chief of The News Movement. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us. So it's all about Peter Mandelson making the headlines in the UK today. And Rebecca, what I found so interesting is just 24 hours ago, Keir Starmer gave a full-throated defence of Peter Mandelson. What changed, and so quickly?
Absolutely. I mean, it's what they say, 24 hours is a long time in politics. I mean, we've done a complete reversal in how we feel about Peter Mandelson. So as you say, we had PMQs yesterday in London. Kemi Badenoch, leader of the opposition, absolutely forensic in her cross-examination of Starmer and his appointment and support of our man in Washington, Peter Mandelson. You know, as you say, at the time, Keir Starmer said that the ambassador had his support. He didn't go far enough as saying his full support. And then here we are this morning, an urgent question in London, and the Foreign Office then asked Peter Mandelson to withdraw from the field. You know, I think domestically, this couldn't be happening at a worse time for Keir Starmer, and it throws his judgment, what he knew and when, into huge amounts of disrepute. But it's been an astounding week for Peter Mandelson. You know, firstly, we get the 50th birthday book released by the Epstein estate to the Democrats. We see that Peter Mandelson has left Epstein a 10-page happy birthday message calling him his great pal. We then get the interview with the Sun, with Harry Cole, the editor-at-large, where Peter Mandelson admitted that there were going to be more uncomfortable levels of more uncomfortable details and communications that would come to the fore. And here we are on Thursday morning, and he's out of a job. I mean, it is absolutely astounding. Peter Mandelson, a man who has had 3 comebacks, this was his 4th, and I think probably difficult for him to recover from now.
But, you know, it's so interesting because we obviously saw Keir Starmer really standing by him, and we know that Angela Rayner just a week ago also lost her position. So right now, how embarrassing is this for the Labour Party? Because, as I said, it's not the first high-profile sacking in recent times, and Starmer seems to be going through these top leadership MPs.
Absolutely. So as you say, we had Angela Rayner resigning last week from her role as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary over the unpaid tax bill. We've had Tulip Siddiq, Roshanara Ali, Louise Haigh. You know, we've had some serious high-ranking Labour officials having to resign within the first year of government. Could not have happened at a worse time for Starmer. As you guys will know, you know, the Reform Party here is topping the polls. Keir Starmer's favourability and that of the Labour government is, you know, the polling is in the floor for them. They came back in September after recess. They had a new plan for renewal. This was the, you know, year 2 of their government. It was all about delivery. And instead, they have been kind of bombarded by bad news and headlines. And I think, as you say, this really does call Keir Starmer's judgment into question. You know, the appointment of Angela Rayner, standing by her, waiting until the Ethics and Standards Commissioner ruled that she'd broken the rules, and then getting rid of her, and then the initial support for Mandelson, and then what we saw this morning. You know, the government is in turmoil, and it's at a time when Starmer really needed to be showing a kind of show of stability and strength as they try and get those poll ratings back to where they need to be.
And I think, Rebecca, we can see that all the parties in the UK have actually condemned the situation that's happening within Labour and Keir Starmer standing by Mandelson and not getting rid of him quick enough. And as you said, Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party, in PMQs yesterday, she really outlined everything and highlighted it and forced an answer out of Starmer, which he didn't give. And the big question now is he the right person to be leading the UK? Because, as you know, Reform are leading in the polls. The Tories have lost lots of support, but Labour, who got a landslide majority, are losing lots of support too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really, really valid question. And I'm sure there are a lot of people on those Labour backbenches and maybe even closer to Keir Starmer than he'd like to admit who are thinking the same thing. You know, there's one thing about presenting yourself in this kind of managerial way. We had the campaign, you know, their campaign election, the 2024 campaign was all around kind of restoring integrity, dignity, standards to public office after the 14 years of Conservative rule. They've been in power for just over a year. And they've, you know, you would make the case that, you know, exactly the same level of kind of scandals and wrongdoing have marred the Labour Party. And you think, you know, potentially is Keir Starmer the man to do this? And I think even if he maybe technocratically is a very thorough leader, his ability to communicate with the British public and reassure us that he's the guy for the job, that he is capable of making the right decisions and that the team around him are the right people, I think is definitely up for question. We're going into Labour Party conference in a few weeks in Liverpool. You know, there'll be lots of meetings, lots of, you know, secret coffees and late night drinks where I'm sure there'll be some people plotting, you know, who could be the next leader of the Labour Party and whether that's Starmer or not.
And will the Mandelson-Epstein scandal cast a shadow over President Donald Trump's state visit to the UK, which we know is happening next week? Because obviously we are talking about Epstein still, something Donald Trump's desperate to shut down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it feels hard to imagine that we won't be talking about this. You know, firstly, this the second state visit from Trump is completely unprecedented. It's historic. It shows how seriously Starmer was taking rebuilding that special relationship with America, you know, building good relationships with Trump. We knew how important it was. He expended a huge amount of political capital in the way that he managed Donald Trump in their early meetings, going to this effort to have the state meeting. Because we really need America on side. You know, it's a busy time for NATO. We've got the conflict in the Middle East. We've also got, you know, Russia incurring into Polish airspace with their drone strikes earlier this week. You know, that solid relationship between the UK and the US is really, really important. And we know that the Epstein issue isn't going away for Trump, and it's one that he really doesn't want to acknowledge, and he wants to keep it far away from him. And so this feels like a real mess that couldn't be happening at a worse time for Starmer or for Trump, arguably.
Rebecca Hudson, we'll have to see what happens in the next 24 hours. As you said, it is a long time in politics. Thank you so much for speaking to me, Editor-in-Chief of the News Movement. A reminder of our top stories. The manhunt continues for Charlie Kirk's killer as the activist and influencer is shot during a university appearance. Peter Mandelson, the UK's ambassador to the United States, is sacked over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. And the UK announces it's producing advanced drones to help Ukraine defend itself from Russian airstrikes. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. And we'll be back in a couple of hours' time with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for joining us.